Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. I like to think of this as both a material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Today we're welcoming Simone, co-owner of 3 stunning rentals in northern Minnesota and the founder of She Hosts Consulting. From building her first cabin as a screen porch that evolved into something more, to now helping other hosts navigate their journeys from raw land to profitable properties, Simone brings a unique perspective on intentional hosting. Originally from Brazil, she found herself embracing Minnesota cabin life through love, and together with her partner has created a collection of timber frame retreats that showcase both craftsmanship and heart. Whether you're dreaming of building your first cabin or looking to improve your hosting skills, we'll explore everything from construction budgeting to the art of guest communication and why sometimes the best hosting advice mirrors how we text when we're flirting. Let's do it. Simone, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to chat with you.
Thank you. Me too. Thank you for the invitation. This is very exciting.
Yeah, I'm going to dive in big picture first, because in listening to my own podcast on the last road trip, I realized the thing that I do is I don't have people introduce like the location, the context for like why we're talking to them, because I read the whole pre-interview and then I just dive right in. So I'm going to have you start there. Can you introduce yourself, your properties, where you're located, and we'll use that as a starting point.
Okay, that's perfect. So I'm Simone Strand. And I co-own 3 rentals in northern Minnesota. And they are now full-time short-term rentals that we built from the ground up, cabins from scratch.
I have this on my list of things I want to talk about when hosting, because remote hosting is a question I get a lot, and I'm 13 hours away. You're even further. But you also built all of these. So take me back to your roots in Minnesota and like why this location.
So I am actually from Brazil originally, and he is originally from northern Minnesota. He's from that area. So that's how he basically went back home and I went to visit and then stayed. Yeah. And,
so you have lived in Minnesota?
Yes. I was there for 11 years.
Were you there during the builds?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. So we, when we first met and I went there to visit, he had just basically closed on this piece of raw land. Okay. So I got to be a part of all the fun.
Okay, but this is fascinating to me, because this is the opposite of the situation with my husband, where I had all these visions and the connection to the land and went all in, and then Sean, we were only dating, kind of got wrapped up in all of it because he didn't really have a choice, right? Because when you're just dating, it's like, I'm going to make choices for my life and you're either here for it or not. How did you feel when he first told you, okay, I'm buying this land, I want to do this? Is this something you had in common? So it was like, of course we're going to do this? Or were you like, he's a little bit crazy?
Oh, no. That buying land, and that was not at all on my plans. It was just, something completely, was not a part of my life plans at all. But he had this vision. He had this opportunity to buy this land, and he walked through it, and he just had this vision in his head and how he wanted to develop it. But of course, when we first started, Airbnb was not a thing. So building it for short-term rentals was not a part of the goal. That came much later.
So what was the goal? What was the original vision before that?
So we met in our early 20s. So the goal was to live there in the summertime and be snowbirds in the wintertime. We wanted to travel and, visit other places and see other things. And we moved into the raw, and there's so many pieces of it, but we moved into this, raw land and to live in his pickup camper at the time while we were developing the land. So, clearing all the land and building the driveway and putting all the infrastructure, there's just so many pieces. I'm like trying to put it all together. But our first goal was to turn it into, so actually build something that we could get out of the bugs, basically is how we would say in the summertime.
Yeah.
So we wanted to build this, our vision was to build this screen porch type of thing. And then as we were building it, the person that was helping us, he said, why don't you guys put in like a sleeping loft on it? So then we did. And then from there, we're like, well, if we're going to put a sleeping loft, let's maybe try to put a little area where we can cook. And then that ended up developing into this cabin.
It grows so quickly. When you try and stay small, it grows so quickly.
I know. At first, it was a 12 by 16. It was a very small. And then we just put in the back, we put in a small bathroom and a small kitchen. And but the cabin itself is very, like you enter, and this is what all of our guests say now, is that you enter and does not feel small because it has such a tall, the ceilings are vaulted and there is a sleeping loft. So that's where you go to sleep. And it just doesn't feel as small as its footprint. So that was the goal, was to just get something together so we could get out in the wintertime and, from the winters from Minnesota. And then when we came back after we built the bones for it, he had the opportunity of getting this full-time job, and then we realized that we had big bills to pay. So we just kind of like, okay, we better just reconfigure our mid-20s goals. And then we ended up just turning the cabin or the screen porch into an actual little cabin where
And this is the first one. This is, tell me how you say it. I want it to be pronounced properly.
Agua Norte.
Agua Norte. Okay. So this is the one I'm looking at right now. It looks meticulously designed, though. Like, I would not suspect by looking at this cabin, and we'll drop photos in here, but in looking at this cabin that it was kind of a screen porch turned a little bit more. Like, that's not what it looks like. Did you, and this is what's tricky with design. If you start small and then grow it, it's often not intentional, but this is. Did you all design it? Did you work with a designer?
No, we designed every inch of it. So, if you notice, like, the windows are huge, and everywhere you look in the front, they're huge windows because that part was supposed to be screen. And that first structure where the really big windows are, that's a timber frame structure. And that's
what it looks like.
That was like the bones of the cabin, the screen porch, when we built it that first summer. And we took off that winter, and then we came back. We're like, all right, we got to reconfigure this. And that's when we developed into a bigger thing.
Yeah.
But we did plan every little inch of it because it's so small. So every quarter of an inch counts, and we had to put, everything had to have a home. And we also then had somebody help us with, just putting it into a CAD system and like actually letting us know that all this scratch paper that you have here, all these drawings are actually going to work. And then giving us some suggestions, of course. Too.
Yeah. Did you build it yourself? Did you need, because like I would think turning it into CAD plans would be necessary for a builder to understand what you're doing. But you all built a lot of it, didn't you?
We did. We built, I wouldn't say the majority of it, but we were definitely, especially that very first cabin, we touched every portion of it. So the timber frame itself came from the area, not from our land, but for the entire region. So he was a logger, and he has a friend that is also a logger. So they would, get from trees that they were going to be cut anyway because of fire, so all those things. And then, so we got a lot of logs from that. And we also, they also milled the whole thing and sawed the whole thing. And then the timber frame structure, we had somebody that was a timber framer actually designed the timber frame structure so we could put it together. And he came and he was there, of course, to, put the thing up but yeah, we were a part of every single thing of it, every actual like hands-on construction.
And this was early in your relationship.
This was, yeah. We were definitely in the honeymoon stage.
How did it change your relationship?
During the rough of construction. It was very intense. It was very intense. There was definitely a few things that I would try to keep separate because if you're building anything with your partner, you have to try to keep things separate, and also celebrate the wins.
Yeah.
That's something that when you're in the grind, sometimes it's really hard, because then you cross something off the list and okay, next thing, and then you kind of forget to take the time. So I definitely do that.
Did you all get to live in it first, or did you start renting it immediately?
So we lived in it for 2 years.
Okay, full time.
And then full time, yeah. And then that's when Airbnb started, poking its head in our little town. This was back in 2016. So then we had friends, that were starting on Airbnb and kind of giving that a try. So we decided to try it too.
Yeah. Did you have any hesitation? I think mostly because some folks listening might not be hosts yet or early on in their hosting. And I always hear from people about the nerves. Did you have any hesitation, or was this just immediately a good idea in your mind?
Oh, I didn't. The idea was like going up and down between him and I. Sometimes he really wanted, sometimes I really wanted to turn into a rental. But I was very jealous of our cabin, and it was our first little home. We built it. There's like us everywhere, and it just like it's your baby. So then we decided to just kind of try it first. So we tried it the first summer. We tried it for like a month and a half in the summertime. And
where did you go?
We moved into our sauna.
Wait, you lived in a sauna while you were hosting it?
I should say our tiny house, aka sauna.
Okay.
But, yeah, it was. It's a sauna. Well, it was not a full-on sauna at the time. It was actually not even fully finished. So we just moved into it for like a month and a half. It's a big sauna.
It has to be.
Oh my goodness. So we moved in, just the two of us and our dog, and we didn't have kids at the time, and then we tried the whole Airbnb thing for like a month and a half, and it was amazing. It
really
was not just financially. I mean, financially, it definitely blew our what we had expected, but just the guests, just the people, just the gratitude, just the appreciation it was very unexpected to me.
And so then you've grown since then. Did that come from that experience being like, oh my gosh, this is so good, but we also still want to live here, so we should build another place? Did your mind immediately go to growth? Or what was the next step when you were like, this is amazing? What did you do with that information?
So we tried again the following summer, did the same thing. We upgraded our sauna and then moved back into the sauna for a couple of months. And then we were like 25. It was okay then.
I can't believe your relationship survived all this.
I know, it's tricky. But then we decided that, it was definitely worth it. And we wanted to build a bigger place anyway, because the cabin is very small if we wanted to have a family or anything like that. So then we built a bigger, what we call the big house, which is it's 1,400 square feet total. So it's 700 square feet upstairs and a garage down below. There's also 700 square feet with a utility area. So it has laundry area and a second bathroom and everything. So then we built that in a couple years after we started renting the other one. So then we could turn the original one into a full-time rental, and moved into the big one. Is
this, I'm looking on your website. Is this the Lake Superior view with sauna on 20 acres? Is that the big one?
That is, that would be the loft, I think. Yeah. That's the one you might be looking at. Yeah.
Okay.
Which is also a timber frame.
Yeah. Are they all timber frame?
Yeah, they're, both of them are timber frame. Our newest one has, timber frame accents to it. Okay. It's not a full-on timber frame.
Okay, which keeps it looking similar to the other two. Like there is consistency there.
Yes, and that is, it's all on the same slice of land. It's all like, so when you drive up, you will see all three of them. They're spread out on the parcel, but when you drive up on the driveway, you can see all three of them. And them being looking similar was my partner's. he needed to have them kind of looking that they belong together type of thing versus like they all having kind of a different thing. So even the outside, the siding and the colors of the shingles, the cedar shingles on the siding and the color of the trim, everything is all the same. It all belongs together.
Can you tell me about the piece of land? How did you find, because these all are right on Lake Superior. It's beautiful. It feels like a very rare or hard to find piece of land. Mm-hmm. Did you all have emotional attachment to that area?
Yeah, so this is where he grew up. This is where he was born and grew up. So he had the opportunity to get just a small little slice of it. This was many years ago, 15 years ago when he purchased. And then so we own today 20 acres, but the first parcel was 4 acres, 4.5. So then there was this parcel behind, which was just really sad looking because the entire property was very raw and it was just like dead birch trees and just kind of brush everywhere. So there was this parcel behind that just looked ugly. So then he went after to try to figure out who owned it. And then he finally tracked her down and, it was this older person that didn't really use it. So we bought it from her. And then we bought the one right next to us. So we just kind of went on developing or buying, bigger parcels as we kind of went on. And we were just lucky that we had that whole piece was available. Because we do have neighbors on both sides.
Yeah, but it sounds like you bought buffer. I feel like that's the debate I think sometimes I think about in terms of investment of like buying enough land if you want to build multiple properties or just like buying enough land that you can guarantee privacy for years to come, because that isn't a guarantee anymore. But when, in terms of buying that buffer around you. And so it appears that they have nice space in between them.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we definitely do. And I think that's part of that specific area too. Like everybody is trying to have, I think it's just part of the attraction of that specific area, or maybe just anywhere in the woods where people are just really trying to kind of keep the trees and everything around them. So in that parcel specifically has a lot of land and a lot of space in between the neighbors. Yeah, you cannot see either side. It's pretty awesome that way.
This has come up recently a lot, both in a post and past conversations about what makes a cabin and answers that actually have nothing to do with the cabin. And this is one of them, right? Isolation, getting away from your everyday life, having privacy around you. These are things that you can design the perfect cabin and build the perfect cabin, but without those elements, it has an entirely different experience to it. And you all have, obviously, you've designed beautiful cabins, but you also have kind of thought about beyond just the actual cabin.
Yeah, I think seclusion is definitely, so we wanted that for ourselves. And this was partially why we built, the cabin where we built. That was all thinking about it. Because so at the when we first built the first cabin, we did not own the other parcels. So just building that and its location was thinking, okay, how do we do it? So how do we minimize any kind of a neighbor view or anything that they have going on that side? And then from there, it was also understanding our guests. Once we started like thinking about, okay, we're going to build this cabin now, our third cabin, we're going to build this cabin to be a short-term rental. That was in the stage of our business then that we already knew exactly who our guests are. And they are people that are coming from the big cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul. That's the majority of our guests. And they're driving up because, and this is a 5 to 6 hour drive. They're driving up because they're looking for they're looking for space. They're looking for just seclusion and calm and peace, and just they don't want to have neighbors. So even the first cabin that we built and our house, they are very close-ish together. They're just across the driveway from each other. But the way that they are designed is that you don't see each other. Like you just don't, like you can get into the cabin or enjoy the outdoor deck and all you see is Lake Superior. and the woods, and you're it with it. Like you're not dealing with, of course, the occasional, like, you know, people kind of coming
Right.
here and there, but not, it's definitely into seclusion. I feel like that's definitely what a cabin should give you, is seclusion.
Yes. Spencer and
And
I,
solitude.
Spencer of Retreat at Fall Branch Falls, I always get that wrong. We're chatting just yesterday about this idea of designing spaces specifically for your guests. And it's really hard the first time around to do that. And in your case, the first build was for you. It wasn't for guests. It was, what do we want? But then through renting that, you got to know your guests a little bit more and then design the next ones intentionally for them. And one of the things that we talked about were design choices that you made knowing your guests. And so I don't even mean, it could be the cabin, but it could be the interior design. It could be amenities. Since you knew your guests better in cabin 2 and cabin 3, what did you do differently because of that?
So the cabin 2 was still originally to be our home. Well, it was actually meant to double as many things. So everything, it was meant to be either our home if we were there, or could also be rented, or it could be used as either a short-term rental or a long-term rental, or it could also be used as support for the business itself. So that's why there is the garage and the utility room and even the bathroom, because we've even considered like a glamping option. Like we considered a yurt or something like that, and then there would be access to this bathroom down below, which we never went into, but that was something that we had thought. So we left that option there during the design. So the third cabin was built specifically.
Yeah, let's talk maybe about the third rental one.
Yeah. So the third one, we did mainly the same thing. We wanted it to be small because I feel like that's just our theme, but just very elegant. And I feel like this is what people that go up there are looking for. They're looking for the cabin-y feel, but they also want it to be clean and modern and just elegant and beautiful. And the first cabin, people always commented on the really big windows. So that had to be a part of it. So you could be inside and still, feel like you're outside. The other thing that we added, or the thing that we added that I think was like the really big thing, was the stove. We don't have we don't have a fireplace in either one of the other two. Because it was just not it was just not in our radar at the time when we were building the other two. It was just an expense that for us in our own home, we're like, we can do without it.
They're not cheap, that's for sure.
They're not cheap. They're expensive. They're expensive to maintain. And so then we also have the whole debate, like, do we go propane or do we go wood?
Looks like you went propane. Is that true?
We did. We ended up going propane. Yeah.
Okay. I'm a big advocate of wood. So why propane?
We went propane because we knew that was going to be a full-time rental, and we just wanted easy maintenance and easy access for guests. We love wood too. It was a really big debate because there's nothing like wood. Like propane can't even get close to what a wood fireplace feels like. But we went for practicality and just basically,
It is the way more practical option. Even in terms of like heating yourself out. In the winter, we often have our windows open because you can't moderate the temperature. And with propane, you can like literally just turn a switch off and you're done.
Just turn it off.
Yeah, you can't do that with a wood stove. You're stuck with it until it like burns out an hour later.
Right.
Yeah, it is a far more practical choice.
And we do have our sauna, which was our tiny house, is now a sauna for the guests to be able to use. And then that is a wood stove. So if guests, are, excited about making a fire or something, there is always the sauna. And we've seen some really wild things of people going into the sauna with lighting fluid and stuff like that.
Really?
I know, yeah.
These are things I need to not hear. I have wood stoves everywhere, and I just don't think about what could be happening.
Just don't. Just don't.
It's probably not the right way.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, but this does take me to my next topic that I want to dive into, because you've been hosting for so long and you've since started your own business around consulting hosts. So it feels like it would be a missed opportunity if we didn't spend at least half of our time kind of picking your brain and getting some of that wisdom and talking about the work that you've done there. And I will say for myself, like when I first started consulting, and I don't do it nearly as much as you, but when I first started, it was a big jump for me to be like, okay, I have something to offer. I had like intense imposter syndrome around it. When was it that you were like, you know what? I've been doing this long enough. I can help new hosts. How did you get to that place that you were like, I think this should be my next business?
I think that is still present. That imposter syndrome is still there, but I do get daily reminders of in different moments. For example, like just talking with somebody about your podcast, for example. Like I was explaining to her that I'm just gonna, be in your podcast, and I'm like trying to tell her just a quick preview of Agua Norte, and I can just blah, 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 and just talk about it for hours. And then if I go into She House, which is my consulting business, I kind of freeze. And then I realize that it's mostly because I have this natural just way of like kind of feeling that She Hosts is separate from Agua Norte in a way, and it is not. Like She Hosts is basically me showing to people how we've built Agua Norte and how we went from raw land to quitting our 9-to-5s and moving to one of the most expensive states in the country. And this is basically what She Hosts is. So once I start going into that mindset, like, no, I've done it. Like I've done it. I can look back in the last decade of my life and I can tell you exactly how we did it. Yeah. And this is what I want to show people how to do. Yeah. So then I go into this mindset of like, I'm not trying to create this business from thin air. Like it's from experience, and the experience is definitely there.
If you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. So how long have you been helping other hosts? When did that start?
So She Hosts actually was created from me finally being like, okay, there's enough people coming to me to ask me these questions. I could do something about this and actually turn this into something. And so I've been, talking with people for years, but actual business itself, it's been just a little over 6 months, maybe less than a year. Okay. And I've had clients from, so we basically, like I say that we go from, was my journey. We go from raw land to quitting your job is like that entire journey. And wherever you are in it, I can meet you there, and how far along you want to go. So I have clients that they will come to me because they're just about to buy a piece of land and they're trying to wrap their heads around cabin costs, right? Because that's a really big one.
Oh my gosh.
How much is it going to cost? So I kind of help them figure that out on their own project. And then
how do you do that? Can we talk about that for a minute? Because that is the most asked question. And to this day, I don't have a good answer other than it's highly subjective. I can't answer that for you. How do you help them?
I so agree with you, like on social media, right?
Yeah.
How much did it cost you to build this?
Right.
One, it's a very personal thing. But two, even if I would
That's
give
right.
you
Everything else aside, you're asking me like a deeply personal financial question.
right. But two, it's also depends on so much. Any number I give you will be deceiving. Like it's very unlikely that's going to be your number. And that is because even if you would build exactly the same property or the same cabin that I built on our property next door, it could be a completely different number. So the way that I help my clients is the way that we've always done. It's like this, just a very simple recipe for you to just start wrapping your head around all the costs. Because I think that is partially for a beginner, somebody that's never built before, like even just, okay, but what are all the costs? Like, what am I even looking at here?
Because if it's your first time, you genuinely have no idea. Like
You
I
have
had
no
no
clue.
idea wells, that they were subjective, that you can't just get a quote for a well. That no, they'll give you an initial quote, but it depends how far they have to dig, right? Like you just don't know that until you do it. And finding all of those resources in one place is really hard.
Yeah, right. And and I have it as She Hosts, I put it together, like the 5 things that you got to do.
What are the 5 things?
So
If there's anything that's proprietary, you can just say you'll have to book a call with me, and that's fine. But if you're willing to share, this is fascinating to me.
I will give you just a very quick rundown.
Okay.
And yeah, but I do have a lot more information. But it's basically, you get into the design. That is the first thing you have to do, is you got to figure out what is it that you want to build, right? Like do you want to build a really tiny cabin? Do you want to build a really big cabin? All of it's going to be different. So you can either, so that's like the very first thing. Just figure out what you want to build. And then from there, I highly, highly, highly encourage going into an architect and getting that design. And that is something that we kind of skimp on in our first cabin. And we had to like spend money trying to fix those things. And it just kind of became this really big thing.
Yeah.
So we learned there. And then within just that first step, there's many ways for you to save money and for you to kind of do your own thing. But then from that, once you have the design, that actually official design, that architect should be able to give you a materials list for your project, right? So now you have this very, like a little piece of gold. Like you can go now material shopping.
Yeah.
And you can go, the other thing then with that, you can go into your contractors and, get a price for that.
That's right. If they have the design and the materials list, you're going to get a much more accurate quote from a variety of contractors than if you don't have those 2 things.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there's a couple of other things that you can do, but the very, 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 very first step is get that design, get it, because that is going to enable, even if you don't want to spend the money with the architect and all that stuff, you can go online. There's so many designs and cabin designs online, and you can just kind of get something that's somewhat similar to what you're wanting. But then, of course, keep in mind that then your actual project could be very different. And then the other portion of figuring out the price too is you have to know your land. Right? Like you have to know where are you going to build, just because the infrastructure itself is extremely expensive.
Right.
It can be, depending on what kind of a land you're talking about. And that could be, if you have a contractor, they could help you with that too, especially a local contractor. Yes. They can help you just kind of navigate and figure out what do you need. And like you said, a lot of the prices for infrastructure are very subjective. Like they are going to give you a quote, but then they're going to give you a bill. And they can be very different.
Okay, I love that. I've never heard that, but that's so right. They're going to give you a quote, but that's not necessarily what you're going to pay. Kind of like if the land's hilly, all of a sudden you have to like grade the land, which is going to be a lot more expensive. You have to build retaining walls so that the water goes in the right places. That's very expensive. And it's so hard to know. So when someone asks me, I'm like, well, I have 12 follow-up questions to even come close to giving you an idea of what it costs to build.
Yeah. And then that's the importance, which is another part of what I tell my clients too on that list, is you have to have a buffer. Just have a buffer. If you cannot afford to this number that you're coming up with, you just can't afford to build it, because you have to have a pretty solid buffer. And then that buffer, that percentage, like you can tackle a percentage like on top of whatever it is that your final number is. That percentage is dependable on how, how conservative you are. And I feel like our percentages have always been like around 50%. So if we figure that after we do all this math, we figure that our cabin is going to cost, I don't know, $100,000, then we have to figure out how to have $150,000, let's say.
Yeah.
And then that can be whatever number you are more comfortable with.
And anyone who's listened to this podcast for any amount of time has heard enough horror stories, hopefully, to know that that is exactly right. And that if you don't have that kind of buffer, that's when things get really scary and risky. And it doesn't have to be that way. And it might mean that you wait a little bit. But that buffer, I feel like, is going to make a world of difference for your nervous system.
Oh, gosh. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so where do most people come to you? I love that you start with like just a dream all the way to leaving your 9 to 5 as kind of the measure of success at the end of that journey. Where do most people come to you at?
Definitely I would say in the Airbnb stage. So it's people that they are, I call it the Airbnb stage, but the short-term rental business beginning. So it's either people that already have the cabin, already built the cabin, or own something, and they're just entering the Airbnb world, or they have been doing it for a year or two, and they're just kind of trying to figure out how do I actually turn this into a profitable business. So that's where I meet them there. It's either launching their business or helping them make it so it's more profitable and it's more automated and it's just actually running for them versus them having to work for it. Yeah, because that's kind of part of the beauty of this industry too, right? That you can I would never say that it is passive in any way, but you can make it pretty darn close. Like you can automate it without reducing hospitality, which I think and to me, hospitality is for both of my businesses, that is the leg of it. Is I feel like this is real estate. Like we're definitely in long-term real estate investing. But this is a hospitality business. Like we're in the hospitality industry, and this is how I run both of my businesses. Is like all of my clients, they want to provide an awesome experience for their guests while making more money. So how do you fill in that gap? How do you not just slap something together? Like how do you not just create, because there's plenty of people out there that what they want is the more, right? They're just like, they just want to buy more properties. They just want to accumulate doors and just like buy everything off of IKEA. I call them the IKEA properties, and nothing wrong with IKEA. I have plenty of IKEA furniture.
Nothing wrong with IKEA.
But it's that mindset of like quality, of like just quantity and practicality, and let's go, let's do more, versus, hey, let's step back and let's put some, like on your property. I love that the back splash in your kitchen.
Oh, thank you.
The wood, and I've always loved that, and that is detail, right? Those are like the little things that make your cabin or your rental special, and they are different from the one next door that is just kind of similar to everybody else's.
Okay, I love what you're saying about hospitality, and I'm so with you. But I want to give people something tangible that they can take away, or not tangible, but usable. So I think about being a master of anything is a mix of, I've said this before on the podcast, so some folks will remember this, but it's a mix of mindset first, and then things that you have to learn or know about your industry, and then skills that you have to work on developing. I'm hoping you can give us one of each, like one mindset that you think is absolutely crucial to be an effective host, one thing that you think all hosts should know or learn about, and then one skill that everyone should be constantly working on developing to be really good hosts. And you can start with any of those. I feel like mindset's harder. You can start with any of those that you want to.
Okay. So I can start with mindset. I think for if you come from the idea that people that are coming to stay at your place are maybe really looking forward to that one trip. It may be this idea where if somebody asks them, just like people ask us, like, do you have any fun plans for the end of the year or something? Your property may be it for these people. Is like, I am going to this cool little cabin and I'm just so excited about it. And then, this person may be looking forward to it. Maybe this is the only trip they're going to get to have this year, maybe next year for a few years. Like, this is the only trip they can afford, or this is like a splurge, and it's your property. It's your cabin. So if you come from that thought that your place is, yes, it's a short-term rental, it's an Airbnb, which is a love-hate industry, right? But if you come from the place where you are offering a service to somebody, you are giving time for somebody, you're giving this space for somebody to celebrate a beautiful memory or a beautiful time, or make a beautiful memory, or just be. And this is not just for cabins. I mean, this can be for the people that own, rentals near an airport or something. And they just, they're trying to they're welcoming all these people that are in between travels, or that they're just looking for a place to rest and clean and comfortable. Like, this is big too. You're offering a service. So I think that mindset of, that's like that, I would say that's like the mindset is it's not just a place. It's not just a bed. It's not just a cabin. It's not just something you put together. Like, you're welcoming people, and people have feelings and emotions and expectations and memories. And
I love that. And it's not just those 2 or 3 days perhaps either, right? What you said about they might have been looking forward to this for months. I think we sometimes forget about that. And if something goes wrong during the stay, we apologize for that thing or we refund that thing. What we don't think about is like that suddenly this thing they'd been looking forward to didn't live up to their expectations. So how can you offer not just a refund for that thing, but something that makes up for that, something that could delight them or somehow replace that memory? Because it isn't just those couple of nights. It's really all the anticipation and also the reminiscing. Good trips lead us to like talk about it all the time with a positive association. And you want to make sure that they leave with that too.
Exactly. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because we just had a power outage on our property, and this is countywide. This was actually yesterday, and it was a really big windstorm, and we were out of power for 24 hours. So it means no power, no water. And the guest that were staying was a dad and son that booked many months ago, and they were supposed to be there for 5 nights, and their trip got cut quite short. And now we are like trying to do exactly what you're saying. How do you find a way? And this is not just about the brand. It's not just about our business growth and performance and
reviews and things like that.
No, it goes beyond. And this is the part of the mindset, right? Like, it goes beyond that. These are people that have been expecting this trip in a positive way. They've been hoping for it. They've been talking about it. And then suddenly, like you're saying, it just didn't work. How do you fix that? So, and I think that's part of the art of hosting, right? It's like, the hospitality piece.
Okay, what's one thing that you would want hosts to know, or a skill that you think all hosts should be working on?
Definitely communication. Definitely communication. And I would say it's really hard to communicate via text. Like, it just is. Like, it's much easier for you to show an intonation if you have your voice. But if you are in this industry, that like 95% of communication is going to be via text. So how do you communicate via text in a way that is showing your sensitivity to whatever it is that they're asking, your kindness, your hospitality in general.
Yes.
And I think that is, you know, it is you just practice that skill. And I think also just thinking that you are texting your best friend, or you're texting somebody that you are flirting with, but not being flirtatious, but just you're very involved. You're very,
I love
like,
that
attentive.
description. That's actually so good. You put thought into everything you type when you're flirting with someone.
Exactly. Right? Exactly.
Yes.
You're very
I love
attentive.
that.
You're very attentive. Like, you respond quickly.
That's right.
Don't ice them. Like, just, you know, just kind of think through it and be kind. I think just, which I guess is kind of partially part of that mindset too, but definitely a skill that people should be working on is communication, because that's also, especially the first communication with your guests, going to be what's going to set their stay. Like, it's going to set the tone. So if you have a really warm and welcoming communication, your guests are going to come already to your place with that
Yes.
feel, you know, that they're going to be taken care of because you have been so wonderful since the beginning.
Oh.
Yeah.
So glad you said this, because I've been training Sean in communication, because I do all of the communicating with guests and I love it. I don't want to give it up, but I get very anxious because I'm so worried. I'm a videographer, so I'm often on set all day. And so I get so nervous that if something goes wrong and I don't get back to them fast enough, what will happen? So I've been training him so that I can have a backup and just ease some of my anxiety, because my nervous system is struggling. And yesterday I was hosting a podcast, and so he knows when I'm hosting a podcast, I'm out of commission for an hour. And when I got off, I checked the messages, and there was one. Someone had asked about firewood, and he had responded. And he comes in and he goes, "Did you see my response? Didn't I do good?" And I was like, "You responded." And he goes, "What do you mean? It was a great response." And he was like, I was like cheeky and like warm. And then I read it out loud to him in my voice. It was about firewood. And he said, "No need to BYO, period. We've got plenty stacked up for you, period." That was all he said. And he answered the question and they got a speedy response, which was great. But he doesn't quite seem to understand that flirtatious piece, that like a little fire emoji would have gone a long way, or like, "We've got you covered. No need to worry about wood," right? Like there's one exclamation point would have added a little bit of flirtatiousness to it.
That's true. That's exactly it. Yeah. And it seems so small, but it makes such a huge difference, because it's not necessarily how you are writing. How you are saying is, how are they going to hear it?
Yes. And in his head, he thought he was being cheeky. I don't know, by saying BYO. I'm not sure. But he in his head had convinced himself that this was a great warm response. And I read it in the way that I read it, and it wasn't. So it's like, this is a skill. It takes practice. That's the reason funny. I share that story. I really do think some people, but this is a bigger question. No, I'm not going to go there yet, but I am going to ask you next. After you share what they need to know, I want to ask if you think hosting is an art or a skill, and if people are born with it or if they can learn it. But we're not going there yet.
Wow. Okay.
Let's go to knowledge first. One thing that all hosts should know.
I think that, well, there are two things that I can think of. One is, well, there's so many things, but one thing that comes to mind is, this I think goes with the mindset a little bit, is that hosts need to know that they're hosting people.
Yeah.
And that, you know, people come with all their baggage, and that a lot of times they're going to, you know, flip at you because, I don't know, there's dust under that corner table or whatever. And things that are not that big of a deal, but they are coming with that already. They're coming from that expectation. It has nothing to do with, if you are, of course, providing a really good place to stay with quality and everything, there's nothing to do with you. People are people. Like they're just gonna, you know, bring whatever it is that they have in their little backpacks full of, you know, experiences and emotions and everything. Which also gives the host some grace, and it also gives the guests some grace to just, and that is not to say that hosts should always do what guests say. That's far from it. The guests are not always right.
Yeah.
And you don't have to always bend backwards for them. But there is a very beautiful balance there that you can both win. Like, it can be a win-win. You can provide this wonderful experience, also keeping your boundaries and building your business.
Yes.
So that's one thing that I think hosts should keep in mind. And the other thing too is that I think everybody should know is that short-term rentals are not passive. It's just not a passive industry, unless
not
you
if
have
done well.
somebody. Yeah, exactly. And unless you have, a property management that's going to just completely take over, and you're going to just sit back and collect your remainder 20% or something.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's not passive. I feel like there's a lot of clients that they come to me and they're like, I want it to just basically sit back and collect my payout. And I'm like, we can get very close with automations and just systems and things. You can get really close, but you will still have to spend time putting you in your business if this is what you are trying to build.
That's right. And you can hire a property management company and get out of it. But if you are going to be the one running it, then it is hospitality, and that is a job. I think that's why my feelings get hurt sometimes when people call it passive. And I don't mean to be defensive about it, but it's more, I think good hosts just have a desire to be seen. All of those quiet, thankless hours we put in behind the scenes, making sure every detail is right, responding in a way that's really supportive, coming up with things to do for guests. Like, we just want to be seen. That is work that we're doing, and we often love it, but it is not passive. It is not passive.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, you've coached a lot of hosts. So do you think that it's learnable? Like, I think let's agree that there's a gray area where, of course, you can always get better at hosting. Otherwise, people wouldn't be listening to this podcast or wouldn't be hiring you. But do you think at its core, you either have something deep down that will make you good at it or not?
That's such a good question. I think it depends on what you're trying to build. If you're building a business that is what you and I have, and that is, it's guest centric. Yes, you're here. You're building this business because, of course, you want to make money. I mean, otherwise, why would you do it? But another leg of your business is the guest. If you're building that kind of a hosting business, I would say the one thing you would probably want to have as a natural thing is just a little bit of empathy for people.
Yeah.
And it's just a little bit of understanding that you just have a little bit of that understanding that these are people. And from there, you build onto your skills. You build your skills. So you will build, of course, like, just not the operation part of it, that you have to learn so many things on the operational side of the business. But also, the guest quality and the communication, like you're coaching your husband, and all those things you can build. Of course, you can definitely learn how to be a better host. And I think the only thing that you might want to have an inclination to is just wanting to treat people right, and just wanting to be good. And I think most people have that already.
You're giving way too much credit.
You think so?
Yeah, I don't, and I tend to assume the best of people, but I don't think the majority of, if I had to put numbers on it, I don't know if I could do that. I think our community is a very special one, and the hosts that you probably interact with do. I think most people listening to this podcast do. Yeah. I don't know. Have you been in an Airbnb Facebook group recently?
It's hot. Yeah.
I mean, I would definitely argue that the majority of them do not have that mindset. And they're choosing to host. Those are people, we already have a select group of people opting into this.
That is true. That is true. Yeah, I might just be very privileged with the people that I work with.
I think I am too, but
yeah, I wonder if it is I wonder if it is just the type of businesses too, like the difference between, building what we're building, like these beautiful cabins based on guests, or the IKEA cabin or the IKEA
Right.
properties.
Right.
Maybe there is a gap there. I don't know.
Yeah. And in those Facebook groups, you have no idea because it's just their names, right? Like on
True.
Instagram, I feel like we're able to curate a bit more. I can go to an Instagram account and pretty quickly, I think, get an idea of the type of host behind it. And that doesn't mean that I like won't engage with, if I'm like, you don't see many IKEA properties on Instagram, to be fair. So a lot of them that I engage with, you can look and you can just immediately tell the kind of care and intentionality that they're putting. And if they're putting that care into their space and their marketing, then I just assume they're putting that care into but even then, I don't know, all of us. I mean, I'm constantly reflecting on my own ability to empathize with guests. Like recently we just had a guest whose dog peed all over the carpet and didn't tell me. And now we're trying to like replace a rug. Right. And I don't think it's abnormal to initially go to a place that's like, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they? Right. And I have to work constantly to be like, I wonder if something else was going on. I wonder if their dog has a urinary tract infection and they don't know about it. Right? Like it takes work sometimes to push yourself to that place and really see the human.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's just, you can only do so much because there's definitely entitlement and people that just plain just doesn't care and that I am paying for this place type of mindset. But I think just starting from grace, starting from that idea, okay, what happened here? And then if you can't, and this is not to say that, like I said before, that you should, like your guests, like to just, oh, it's okay, your dog peed all over. Like, no, like you have your boundaries, you have your business, and this is not okay. And you have a very specific, you have to be firm. It's almost like I have a 4-year-old, so it's very much like that too. Like you have your boundaries and you're firm with your boundaries, but yet you're seeing that there is a person right there that did something wrong, and they're either fighting it and screaming, or they are really scared and they're like, I'm so sorry. I just, so you're like balance that out, and you try to figure out between your boundaries and your property and your profitability and everything, and also the human. It's a balance. It's a little dance.
Yeah.
But I find it like a really, this kind of a little exciting part of the business.
Yeah.
Too.
Oh, if it weren't teaching us things and we weren't learning, it would be boring to do this, I think. So
Right.
I think if you ever just settle and you're like, okay, like I'm a good host, it is what it is. I did that for years, I think, until I hit a point where I was like, oh no, I want to create something different. I want to do something better. And then everything changed. And I think it becomes more fun. And to your point about the communication, right? It's that skill. It's first of all having that right understanding of they're a human. And then it's figuring out, how do I communicate? How do I hold my boundary and support them as a human? Well, the way that you do that is through artful communication, which is such a skill that it almost feels impossible to master. AI is helping, probably. But that working towards mastery is actually a really fun part of this, because it's also translatable to other parts of our life, how you're communicating that to your 4-year-old,
Exactly. Yeah. You can, it's communication. You use it for everybody. I think
everywhere.
Even if you're not a host, everybody should learn.
That's right.
And it's in progress. Like you're always, because communication is always also evolving, it changes, but yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me. Tell people where they can find you, especially if they are somewhere on that dreaming all the way through quitting my 9-to-5. Where do they find more information about working with you?
So the name of the business is She Hosts, and you can find me online at She Hosts, so ohshehosts.com, and that's also the Instagram handle. And then you get all the information there. You can just chat with me on Instagram, and we can figure your whole journey out wherever you are.
All your answers right here. Thank you, Simone. This was a treat.
Thank you so much, Dennis.
Thanks so much for joining us, and if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.